Hi, so today I want to talk about global warming and the debate surrounding whether it's a man-made occurrence or a natural phenomenon. And before I get into any of that, I want to start with an introduction, just shedding some light on global warming if you don't know a lot about it. And basically, what you need to know is that global warming is a gradual increase in the overall temperature of the Earth's atmosphere. And the current phase that we're seeing began in about the mid to late 1800s, due in large part to the Industrial Revolution. And even though it started that long ago, it didn't really begin to receive any sort of press until the 1950s, which is about the time when people noticed it as a huge issue that could pose a serious threat to ecosystems and even human life in due time. And since then, it's been a controversial topic with lots of debate surrounding it. But regardless of what stance you have on it, it's undeniable that it has a huge impact on global ecosystems, cycles of the earth, and even things outside of the natural world, such as the economy. And on the third slide, I have this picture here that I think helps to set the stage and show just how serious greenhouse gas and global warming is. This shows the carbon dioxide emissions by big populations around the world. And I think it's interesting that you can notice at about the 1950 mark a noticeable spike that's still continuing today. And like I said, 1950s is about the time where people started to recognize global warming as a huge issue. And going into viewpoints, which is the main focal point of this presentation, of course there's many differing opinions with it being such a huge topic, but the two that I wanted to focus on are whether global warming is man-made or whether it's just a natural occurrence of the Earth. And there's a lot of evidence to support both sides, but we're going to delve more into that later. On the right side here, I have this graph that shows that nearly half of Americans are sure that global warming is happening. And this kind of just shows that global warming is a huge issue that most of the general population is familiar with. This doesn't necessarily support one side or the other. It just shows that global warming is actually a huge topic that does have a lot of debate surrounding it because of the amount of people that are aware of it occurring. And going into the viewpoint that global warming is a man-made occurrence, it's probably the most accepted and commonly seen viewpoint for global warming. And I have a couple of quotes here from articles. More than half of the observed increase in global average surface temperature from 1951 to 2010 was caused by human activity. And that was from an article taken by Housefather in 2017. And this is more to just kind of set the stage for this viewpoint because it doesn't really have any evidence to support it, but it is a statistic, and I will delve into later how it is supporting this side of the argument. And the next one, greenhouse gas emissions caused by humans increased global temperatures by around 1 degree Celsius since pre-industrial times. This just means that since pre-industrial times, which is about the mid to late 1800s, global warming or greenhouse gas emissions have increased the global temperatures by around 1 degree Celsius, which doesn't seem significant, but it has huge implications, as I'll talk about later. And global carbon dioxide emissions strictly from human activity have increased over 400% since 1850. And that kind of just shows that there is definitely something other than a natural cycle occurring here, because 400% is completely unnatural even within the Earth's cycles, which are known to be erratic and spontaneous. And on this slide, I just have two pictures that kind of help to show how this viewpoint is significant. And the left side is showing 20 of the warmest years on record were in the past 22 years. And this graph as a whole shows the global surface temperature anomalies. And as you can see, it's been mostly warmest years, pretty much since the 80s. So it's almost becoming less of an anomaly and more of just the norm for there to be a warmer year than the last. And then on the right side, I have extremes becoming more frequent, and I'm talking about extremes in weather events and natural events and stuff like that. So along with global warming, people have noticed that there have been upsurges in atypical weather events, extreme weather events, earthquakes, hurricanes, and stuff like that. And it's just one of the things that go hand in hand with global warming. And then the refute against the counter argument, the most common refute is usually that Earth cycles don't occur over just half a century like we're seeing right now, in such a short span. And that's the most common refute against the argument that global warming is just a natural cycle. And unfortunately, this counter argument, even though it can be backed up by a lot of evidence, it kind of fails to address the undeniable relation between the increase in global surface temperature and the increase in greenhouse gas emissions, which have so many similarities to each other, it's almost undeniable. And the counter argument also tends to rely too much on history, and not a lot of its evidence and support looks at what's occurring right now, because what's occurring right now is definitely an anomaly, even within the realm of Earth's cycles. So it tends to look too far back at what has happened in the past rather than looking at the events that are occurring right now. And then moving on to the viewpoint that global warming is just a natural cycle of Earth, people that hold this viewpoint just tend to believe that global warming is just another one of the phases that Earth goes through, because as we know, the Earth goes through a lot of phases. Earth is notorious for being sporadic and unpredictable, and we can even see that today with things like earthquakes, which we still aren't able to predict before they happen. So I have a quote here from the U.S. Department of Agriculture published in 2014, and that says, "The Earth's climate can change in multiple timescales, from years to decades, centuries, and millennia." And this basically just shows that just because it's commonplace for the Earth to have phases take place over hundreds of thousands, even millions of years, it doesn't mean that the Earth can't go through phases within just a few decades, like we're seeing now. And the increase in global temperature directly coincides with advancements in its industry and technology, which makes it hard to refute the opinion that global warming is man-made, but there's definitely still a lot of evidence supporting this side. One of those pieces of evidence is a cycle known as the Milankovitch cycle, which is, it comes about by changes in the Earth's orbit around the sun. And one part of this cycle has to do with planetary albedo, which is the surface reflectivity. And basically, this just says even a slight increase in the change in orbit can change the surface temperature of the Earth. So that could easily be what we're seeing today. And then going into how this argument refutes against the other side, I have a quote from the U.S. Geologic Survey published in 2017 saying that Earth's natural warming and cooling periods happen extremely fast at approximately 10,000 to 15,000 years. And this is because we're currently in a warming period, an interglacial warming period. And we can actually look back in history and also see another one of these, known as the medieval warming period, where the global average surface temperature was also about 1 degree Celsius warmer, as we're seeing today. And this medieval warming period occurred between the 10th and 13th centuries, so it's also it bears a lot of similarities between what we're seeing now. A very short amount of time and a significant increase in the global average surface temperature. And it is worth noting that back then there weren't nearly as much greenhouse gas emissions as there are today. So the warming period today basically could just be fluctuations within the current interglacial period, because it is known that interglacial periods can have warming and cooling periods occur within it extremely fast in the grand scheme of the Earth's life. So kind of transitioning into more of my opinion on this, my personal stance is that humans are mostly to blame for the current global warming phase that we're seeing, because this side of the argument just provides too many facts and too many statistics that we can observe today, right now, whereas the other argument relies too heavily on the historical aspect of climate change. And the direct correlation between the increase in greenhouse gases with advancements in technology are undeniable. And if statistics aren't enough, you can actually go out in the world today and see tangible proof that global warming is occurring. You can look at coral reefs and, as I said earlier, the extreme weather patterns that are showing that global warming is very much a real thing that's happening, and it's very much a real problem that we're still facing today. and it doesn't show any signs of going away. So I hope that this presentation kind of cleared up some confusion about global warming and maybe introduced more viewpoints that you might not have known beforehand. And at the end of the day, you really have to look at both viewpoints for yourself and decide what you think you believe in, and look at the facts and statistics and see which one you think is more reliable. And thank you for watching.